Well, Mrs. Coombs, perhaps you could just tell us something of what you remember about the Leroy mine?
Uh, my father worked at the Leroy before the strike, but after the strike he went to work at the Josie, where he stayed until he was sent to Kimberley. But while we lived up at the mine, we used to go through the Leroy often on our way home. It was, if we came up through the Center Star instead of up the Leroy Trail, we would walk along to the headworks of the Leroy. Sometimes we'd go right through the shaft house and down a steep hill to meet the road that went to the Josie. I used to go that way quite often, and sometimes it would be quite late at night when I'd meet the watchman, and he used to be very nervous about me going down this hill and would often light my pathway down to meet the Josie Road. And sometimes I would come down beside the Leroy to the Dry. Now the Dry is the place where the men changed, and I'd rather time it so that I'd be sure there would be nobody in the Dry, and I'd walk through because it was quite a shortcut to get to the Josie Road. Sometimes after a hockey game we would come up to the Leroy, and the shift bosses on duty would be sitting in the little room where they were making out their reports, and we'd tell them all about the hockey game. They always knew the score because they would phone down, but we'd play the game over before we went on home. Sometimes in the bad weather the roads would be very slippery, and so it was quite a good thing to go through the Leroy. The hoist room was very interesting in that it had an air hoist. And sometimes if we would be underground in the Josie, we'd come over to the Leroy and have a ride up on the Leroy hoist. They knew they were strangers because they could tell the way the bells would ring. They were so used to their own men ringing the bells for the cage to come that if a stranger rang the bell, they would know. So the hoistman, one hoistman in particular, if he heard the strange ring, would say, "That's the Snyders from the Josie," and he'd give us a good ride up to the top. Then we'd go in and visit with him a while and watch him operate this big hoist. Now this hoist, being an air hoist, had the most peculiar sound when the cage would be slowing up. As it came to a level or coming up to the surface, it would make the queerest squealing noise, almost send shivers through you. It was certainly a different hoist from any of the others in Rossland. Then, too, these long drifts out. There was a long drift underground out towards our home in the Durham Addition, and after the men had come off afternoon shift and the blasters were blasting down underground, we would hear these echoes of the blasting late at night. It was quite a weird sound, but we were used to it.
This was after you moved down from the Josie, was it?
No, this was when we were living out in the Durham Addition, when we were children growing up.
Oh, yes.
And before we lived up at the Josie.
Before you lived at the Josie.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
See, I lived out at the Durham Addition all my school life, and when I came back from normal school, my father was then superintendent of the Josie, and we lived at the Josie. And it was there that we went underground so often, whenever we had the opportunity to go underground.
Could you describe that big head frame at the Leroy? It was quite an affair, actually. It was an elaborate head frame.
Oh, yes, it was. I wouldn't know the height, but it was very high, and on the top of it was a flagpole. Now, this flagpole blew down one time in a terrible storm, so they wanted it replaced, but they wouldn't send any person to replace it. They asked for volunteers, and one man volunteered to replace that flagpole, and he slipped and was killed.
Do you remember his name?
Mr. Inches.
Could you tell us about climbing up that head frame at the Leroy, Mrs. Coombs?
This was quite an incident, because to climb up the inside of that tall head frame was quite a challenge. So there was a bit of a stair and then ladders, and from one side to the other, and we eventually, my husband and I, climbed to the very tip of that head frame, and it had a square window set at the opposite angle, and we looked out this window, and the most gorgeous view of the whole surrounding country. It was easier to climb up than to go down, because we had to watch very carefully. We couldn't see behind us very well, and we climbed down from the very tip of that Leroy head frame.
This, of course, was after the thing closed down, or was the hoist still operating when you were up there?
Oh, no, the hoist wasn't operating. No, this was on a Sunday.
Uh-huh.
We usually did it on, well, my husband did it twice. I only did it once, and it was on a Sunday when there was no one around.
Well, that's good.
There was a very famous trail called the Leroy Trail leading from Nickel Plate up to the Leroy mine. Now this was quite steep, and it was well lighted. The lights would be turned on in the evening, and it would be lit all night so that you could always see your way. But in the spring, when the snow began to melt, it was very one-sided, and it was almost like a tightrope to be able to walk up that trail. Many a spill the miners had with their buckets coming up or going down because it would be so one-sided. We don't experience these things today because of the plowing, but anyone who would walk up that Leroy Trail in the spring would remember because it was so soft. This trail, many a miner went up that trail and came home tired. They would meet and walk down together. Sometimes the shift coming up would meet their friends, and this really was a very famous trail. It was quite a shortcut, otherwise you had to go way around through the Center Star to get to town. In this good old Leroy Trail, we really thought it was quite a thing because it was such a short way to get to town.
Fast way too, I guess. Sometimes. You could tell us a little bit about your life up at the Josie, Mrs. Combs.
Well, my father was the last superintendent at the Josie, so we were there, and we saw it close up, and everyone left. One of the particular things that we remember about the Josie was the electric hoist. This was quite an unusual hoist. It was something like the electrical part was something like you would see in a streetcar, with a crank that turned, and it was operated by a hoistman. It was also unique. I think it was the only electric hoist during this time in Rossland. The superintendent's house was quite close to the mine, as most of them were in those days. This house was built up a bit, and at one time was a very nice home. This house was one night a group of us thought we would like to have a ride underground. So my brother could run the locomotive, the underground trolley. So we went down in the Josie, and then we got on this locomotive underground, and we went off to the Leroy. We weren't content with stopping at the Leroy. We went on to the Center Star, and there we met the shift boss, and he said, "What are you doing here?" And we said we were out for a ride. So we didn't stop very long. We went on way out a long drift out the Columbia Kootenai. And when we came back, the shift boss said, I phoned the superintendent, and he told you to get right back to the Josie as fast as you could go. Of course, we had no business over there. If there'd been an accident, there would have been trouble. But people don't think about those things. It really was quite a ride. I think I'll never forget that long ride underground from one mine to another and away out the long drift under Columbia Kootenai Mountain.
That'd be almost a mile and a half, wouldn't it, to cross there?
Oh,
I think it would.
it's a long way.